You're so cool, Brewster.
Have you ever wondered what a gay, Fright Night homaging Benny Hill style horror comedy might look like? If the answer is yes, then you may want to check out Bite Marks, a 2011 horror comedy movie directed by Mark Basinger. Now the story follows these two gay guys basically as they're hitchhiking somewhere, don't know where, and they are picked up by this kind of trucker who has got his little bit of his own backstory. He's been tasked to deliver these coffins to a particular area, and of course they break down, and as the plot unravels they are attacked by vampires. It's not all as it might seem. There are some kind of twists and turns here in regards to vampire mythology, lots of kind of homages to kind of horror movies in general, and that's pretty much your movie. So I won't go too much into plot of this one because there really isn't a whole lot of plot on this one. Instead we will talk about what is good and what is bad about Bite Marks. First thing I want to say though is this is a very low budget film, and this is very apparent when you are watching it. The style of filmmaking here, you can tell it's kind of somewhat inexperienced. I was reading some notes before I did the review basically, and it seems that there were a lot of this kind of when they were filming it was kind of making stuff up on the fly and learning as they went, and that does kind of translate to screen. So be prepared for some kind of low budget filmmaking right here. On the subject of this, we'll kind of start off with the negatives first of all. So the negative, it is quite cheap, and unfortunately some of the sort of editing and the kind of the story flow isn't very good in places. There's lots of occasions where, for example, a window will be down in one scene, the next scene it's back up, and the next scene it's down. Things like that. So there's sort of continuity without the film just seems to kind of be a little bit slapdash. And there's a variety of different things that kind of happen in this movie because of that. Acting, unfortunately, not particularly strong. Isn't particularly good. And on the subject of funny, it isn't very funny. This movie isn't a particularly funny film. There are a couple of good lines which I'll come on to in the positives, but for the most part I feel most of the jokes here land quite flat. And there isn't a lot of story to it either, unfortunately. It really is just located in the cabin of a truck for the most part, and as such becomes quite sort of tiresome. And does take some kind of changes to the vampire mythology, which I don't personally have too much of an issue with, but some purists may object somewhat to it. We'll come on to some of the positives though. I have to say, talking about some of the dialogue, when they do reference some kind of other horrors, I actually found that was quite fun. There's quite a fun scene where they're actually arguing about Dawn of the Dead, the original versus the remake, in the midst of this vampire attack, which I thought was quite fun. And there are some homages to other kind of horror films as well. The most notably being Fright Night, which is actually the reason why I wanted to check this film out. This film has a couple of scenes with Stephen Geoffreys, who was in the original Fright Night movie, and there are a couple of lines with one of the main characters is called Brewster, for example, and there are a couple of lines and also even musical scores that are kind of somewhat similar to Fright Night. So if you are a Fright Night fan, this maybe want to kind of check out it just to kind of see maybe some kind of touches there that are kind of obviously homaging Fright Night, which is obviously a great movie, one of my favourite vampire movies ever. So that was quite fun. Some of the vampire makeup effects I thought were quite good as well. I mean, sometimes it looks just like people with just some dark eye makeup on, but there are some kind of fairly good gore effects sometimes, and they use some sort of prosthetics, and it is somewhat gory in places. And even though it's low budget, I feel they do a pretty good job with some of the kind of the gore effects. And I actually kind of liked some of the new twists that they have on vampire lore. It's quite amusing in some places. They'll reference stuff that they've seen in the movies and say, well, that works in the movies and things like that. But obviously they've made some changes which I feel some work, some don't. But overall I feel this film is very low budget for some, and I don't think it's going to be, it's the amateurish style of it I feel will be the main kind of detractor of this film. I do feel it kind of hits you over the head a little bit too hard with the kind of the gay, I wouldn't even say subtext, it's very overtly about it, and it's almost like saying they have to remind you, we're gay, every sort of 5 seconds they're on screen. So bear that in mind, obviously, your own personal preference in regards to that. But overall, I have to say, although I did have some enjoyment with this film in regards to certainly some of the dialogue and some of the kind of the references to other films and some of the makeup effects I thought were quite good as well. Overall, it was kind of quite a low budget affair, which I feel could have done with a bit more sort of development basically before you kind of, maybe it started shooting and stuff like that. But overall, it's worth a watch with a bit of a vampire odyssey, but it isn't all that funny, to be honest with you, and it's kind of cheap. So I only give this movie a 3.5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.